Looking to book a getaway in 2026? Why not try Which Travel Brand of the Year Trailfinders? Right now, Which members can save £100 on any 7-night or more holiday that includes flights. Just head to which.co.uk/trailfinders to find out more. Not a Which member? Get 50% off a membership right now. Go to which.co.uk/podcast offer to get involved. T's and C's apply.
We often talk on this podcast about Section 75, the protection offered when you buy things with your credit card. But it might not be as straightforward as you once thought. Welcome to Which Money. Hello, it's James Rowe here. Now, as you probably heard just before Christmas, Lucia is away for the best part of the year. She will not be with us again until February 2027, believe it or not. So, unfortunately, you've got me for the foreseeable, so do be kind. Thankfully, I've got some brilliant guests, as we usually do here on the Which Money podcast. First of all, we've got Which's banking investigator, Chiara Cavaglieri. Chiara, hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm good.
Very good, nice to have you here, and it's a warm welcome back to Gurpreet Chhokar as well. She's a lawyer in the Which legal team. Gurpreet, welcome back, it's been a while.
Yeah, it has. Thanks for having me again.
Nice to have you back as well. Chiara, you are on the podcast because you wrote a brilliant piece called Are Credit Cards Still the Safest Way to Pay? You wrote that for the latest Which Money magazine. To begin with, can you just go through the basics of Section 75, what it is and why somebody might actually need to use it?
So Section 75 is a purchase protection for credit card payments over £100 and under 30 grand.
And what it does is if a retailer breaches a contract or a misrepresentation that they've made. So, for example, you've got a faulty product or, an item that you've bought has ended up being fake or not as described. And what Section 75 does is that it makes your credit card provider jointly liable. So basically what it means is that the credit card provider also has to sort the mess out in that situation.
And this is kind of like a superpower for credit cards, isn't it? Because there is a similar thing called chargeback, right, for debit cards. But for credit cards, it almost seems to have this extra layer, and perhaps a greater guarantee that you might actually get your money back. It is a bit of a superpower for paying with a credit card, isn't it, Chiara?
Yeah, we like it at Which because unlike chargeback, it's a statutory protection. It's not part of a voluntary scheme like chargeback, and it means that you've got quite strong protections when you meet the requirements.
And also it's got 120 days. Like, there's a more stricter time limit with
chargeback's more awkward. It's a great tool as well, but credit card payments are also eligible for chargeback. So we like credit card payments because you get both, essentially, assuming it's a purchase over £100. So you aren't beholden to the 120-day window for making a claim, and it's just a much stronger protection.
And this is why you often might hear, people like us, and particularly people like you, Chiara, if they read your stuff in the magazine or on the website, saying it is you do get better protections if you buy something of high value with a credit card. Let's say if you buy a holiday, for example, it does pay off to use a credit card in that instance, for example, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole point is that if you're not eligible for Section 75 using your credit card, you are for chargeback, so you do get both. Whereas if you've used just your debit card, you are relying on that voluntary scheme, the chargeback scheme, which just isn't as powerful.
So let's do some examples then, either hypothetical or I know, Chiara, you spoke to some Which members as well for this piece that you wrote about when you might actually want to use Section 75. So give us a scenario. Somebody's purchased something and something has gone wrong or something has happened. When might you want to enact Section 75?
Misrepresentation can be lots of different things. So it could be that it's not as described at the point of purchase. So something that arrived and either wasn't of the quality you could expect, a reasonable person could expect, or wasn't the item that you were expecting, not the item that you paid for. It can also be that something didn't turn up, or that you had a different kind of dispute with the supplier of those goods.
I will get into the nuances of it, because it does seem sort of in more modern times as we are in now, with more complexities about the way we pay, it seems like Section 75 isn't necessarily up to scratch. But there are nuances that sort of go in our favour. I'm thinking about how you mentioned it has to be over £100 a purchase and less than £30,000, but you don't have to make the full purchase with the credit card. So you could spend over 30 grand, but you could just make a £1 purchase with the credit card and you'd still be protected, right?
Yeah, so it's about the price. It's about the price of the item that you're buying. So that works in your favour when you've, say, put a £1 deposit down on a really expensive item or a small deposit down on a really expensive item and just put that deposit on your credit card and pay the rest using your debit card or another method. But it can also work against you. Say, one thing that people get tripped up over is they think it's the amount they spent at that retailer. I've gone to John Lewis and I've spent over £100. It's about the items that you've bought. So if you've bought 2 T-shirts for 50 quid each, you're not covered by Section 75. You could make a claim under chargeback, but not Section 75. Or if you bought 2 gig tickets from, Ticketmaster, you aren't covered because the individual items are less than £100.
And there are some things that are changing in the near future, or should be changing as well, because buy now, pay later schemes like ClearPay and Klarna and whatnot. I imagine these are services a lot of our listeners have heard of and perhaps used. They should be coming under the umbrella of Section 75 at some point. Is that still on the cards?
Yep. I think from what I understand is there will be rules this year, which means that Section 75 will apply to this buy now, pay later payment. So, for example, when you're using things like Klarna and ClearPay, where you have installments and you're paying for the product that you might have purchased, that Section 75 should be covering those purchases.
It should be for credit purchases. So we know that most store cards and most catalogue accounts are covered. And so it's logical that this will be covered eventually. It's just waiting for it to become fully regulated later this year.
So that's all the positive sides. There's clearly some brilliant elements to Section 75, but because of the different and more complex ways we pay, Chiara, the lines are becoming a little bit more blurred, aren't they?
Yeah, so I think it has been confusing for some time, actually, and I think, ironically, there's some more clarity coming, but it's just not really filtering through to all of the card providers. So I think for a long time things have been really murky and really messy, and that's because the way we pay online specifically has really changed over the last few decades. So it's really common now to go on Amazon or eBay or another site and pay not the platform itself, but a private seller who's using that platform. It's also really common to use what we sometimes call introducer sites. So that's your Airbnbs who direct you again to a private supplier of a service. And for a long time, these claims related to these purchases have been rejected. Banks have been saying that you are interrupting the chain between your credit card provider and the supplier. It's something that we call the debtor-creditor supplier chain, the DCS chain, a little mouthful. But basically it means that there's a fourth party, sometimes a fifth party, in the way that you pay someone online. And it's because things have got much more complex when it comes to online payments.
Gurpreet, just to bring you in on this, so in Chiara's article in the magazine, she wrote that even experts struggle to apply very old regulations to modern payments, let alone shoppers. So if experts can't figure it out, then clearly it's very hard for shoppers to kind of understand where these stand.
Especially where, consumers aren't going to be looking at the legislation. So if they've made a Section 75 claim, they're relying on their credit card provider to have applied it. And what we see is that broadly, the legislation does a good job, but it's the misapplication of Section 75 where you get decisions that might not line up with, if a consumer was to go to the Financial Ombudsman Service. And with the DCS, Chiara has said that the landscape has changed with payments, and it means that if you've got a fourth or fifth party, it doesn't automatically mean that Section 75 doesn't apply, and we can come on to that a bit later. It just means that you have to look at the arrangements between all these parties and what each person is doing in a transaction, and Section 75 can apply in those situations. But I think that credit card providers sometimes you get a computer says no answer. They look at it very literally. And this is where you see, claims not being upheld then.
And, in your day job as a lawyer, are there things that are going in the consumer's favour? Obviously, the Section 75 within the Act is very cut and dry. You have to read the words literally, but there must be so many cases that are happening on a day-by-day basis that almost, what's the best word here? Maybe almost undermine what Section 75 actually says, and, things are being looked at on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, so with the Section 75, the Act includes a concept of arrangements between creditors and suppliers. So you can still have this DCS link that Chiara just mentioned, where you've made a payment via an intermediary, so long as the payment was made under these existing or future arrangements. And it's about how you interpret those arrangements. So what we've seen is in some of the FOS decisions, especially recently, you're seeing that, these cases are coming to the Financial Ombudsman Service after the credit providers basically said Section 75 doesn't apply, but the FOS has basically come out and said that actually we think it does apply, just because when the FOS is looking at these cases, it has a broader assessment. It's looking at Section 75, it's looking at case law, and it's also looking at good business practice. And what we saw in a lot of decisions, Chiara, was basically that you've got different actors in a transaction. So for example, there's me, I've bought something from eBay, and then I've used my credit card to pay for that good. PayPal processed it. So, you've got 4 actors in this chain. And what we saw in a lot of the FOS decisions was that all these parties, they've got different contracts in place, but what's going through all of these arrangements is that they've all honoured to be a part of, for example, the MasterCard scheme. So, they're honouring the payments, they're taking the payments, and they're all working within the same credit card scheme. And that shows that there is an arrangement. And that is one of the concepts in, Section 75. And we saw this debate in a lot of the cases that we reviewed. So it looked like a lot of those decisions where credit card providers were like, no, this doesn't apply because, you've got an eBay or you've got a PayPal or you've got an Airbnb in the mix, end up being overturned and in the consumer's favour.
Yeah, so maybe a working example might be a few years ago, I was looking at some cases from a few years ago. These are financial ombudsman cases, so cases that have been reviewed by the service, complaints that have been reviewed by the service. And some of them from a few years ago were related to Amazon Marketplace sellers. So you've bought from a private seller on Amazon Marketplace. It's not Amazon directly. And the card provider, the bank, has argued that there's no DCS link because Amazon is essentially working as a middleman rather than you paying the supplier directly, which was a very kind of broad interpretation of the rules at the time and was one that was pretty common. And then if you scan forward a few years later, more recent cases, almost identical cases, will be reviewed differently. And we're seeing a lot of those cases upheld in favour of the complainant because they're arguing that there's a pre-existing arrangement between Amazon and these suppliers, these private sellers, which of course there is. They're clearly geared up for that. You buy it from Amazon's platform. The card scheme is the same. Both of those parties benefit from it, clearly, money-wise. And I think it's a more sensible interpretation of what Section 75 is there to protect, and a more sensible understanding of the way that we make payments today. They've changed in the 50-odd years that the Consumer Credit Act was first introduced. Obviously, the way we pay has changed dramatically, and we just need it to match up to those new ways of paying.
It's so tricky, isn't it? Because, of all the stuff you mentioned there, it almost just seems like common sense that you would be protected. Again, another thing that I picked up from your piece was that if you load money onto your PayPal account with a credit card and then pay using that balance, there's no protection, according to the Act. If you then stored a credit card on your PayPal wallet and then paid with the credit card through PayPal, there would be protection. It's just absurd, isn't it?
Bit of a mess, to be honest. I think it is really complicated because there are so many ways to pay now. And that's broadly a good thing for consumers. More choice is usually a good thing for consumers, but it does make the protection side of things really difficult. So when we've looked at this in the past, people either have no clue about protections or, maybe more concerningly, think they understand protections and then when tested, don't. So they're complex. I mean, me and Gurpreet have had so many chats about how to apply, like banging our heads against the walls. It's hard. I mean, the message of the story was really that there's not a one-size-fits-all answer, unfortunately. So with the PayPal example you just gave, there is a clear answer, because although it may sound less obvious to us, actually what you're doing when you're loading a PayPal wallet is you're loading it with cash from your credit card or your debit card. So you're no longer then making purchases. If you spend from that balance, you're no longer making a purchase from your credit card. When you're using it, when your credit card is stored digitally in the wallet and you spend directly from that, you're fine. But if you're loading a wallet with cash from a card, you are then not really paying from that card. So that one, although it's not immediately obvious to normal people, that one does make more sense. But I think the fourth party in a payment chain, these, your marketplace sellers, your PayPals, your payment processors, Airbnbs, etc., that stuff is still really murky. But like I said, I think we've seen a bit of a shift in the thinking from the Ombudsman following decades of case law. But we kind of did a deep dive into a lot of cases, and we noticed a change in the thinking. And we just think card providers haven't fully caught up yet. So our message is to fight rejections. If your card provider says that you won't be refunded, absolutely take it to the FOS, because it's free. And we think quite often that card providers are getting this wrong. So well worth it.
Chiara, I do want to pick up on another case study. I don't know how much of this you remember. It was about a gift card. Which member had bought a gift card in a supermarket? And again, it wasn't a cut and dry situation, was it?
So this is Louise. She had popped into her local Sainsbury's to get a gift card for her son as a gift. And I think, as you often do, you leave it lying around for a while. And I think however many weeks later he went to redeem it, and it had been tampered with. The codes didn't work. 200 quid as well. And she had such a faff getting the money back. So she thought it would be pretty straightforward. Obviously, the gift card had been tampered with. You can't use it. It's not really acceptable. Sainsbury's were being awkward at the beginning, so she went to Barclaycard, her provider. She had used her credit card to pay, and they said that they deemed the DCS link to have been broken. And
why is that? Sorry to interrupt there, but why do they consider it to be broken? Is it because it was a gift? Is that why?
They actually backtracked on the reason why, which is quite interesting. But initially they thought it had been broken because the gift card was for John Lewis. It was a John Lewis gift card, and then she had bought it through Sainsbury's, and there was to their purposes, there was no evidence of a breach of contract. So we went to Barclaycard and we explained that we thought otherwise. But actually, in the meantime, she had gone to Which Legal Services and had got a goodwill gesture refund from Sainsbury's. But I wanted to pick up with Barclaycard regardless, because I thought that they had misunderstood the issue. So to my end, she had bought goods, in this case a gift card. It's ultimately irrelevant. It could have been a kettle. If she had opened the box and the kettle was empty, she should get her money back. And in this case, the gift cards had been tampered with. I mean, arguably, Barclaycard might be right that there was limited evidence that Sainsbury's was to blame for it being tampered with. But I strongly think they were wrong to say that the DCS link was broken. So Barclaycard maintained that because the goods were provided at the time of purchase, i.e. she paid for gift cards and she got gift cards, that they have no connection with the redemption of those gift cards, so the redemption of them with John Lewis. But clearly, to a normal person, that's nonsensical. You've bought something with your credit card, you've met the £100 limit, and something's gone horribly wrong, i.e. you've not been able to spend the £200 that you've spent to exchange. And I think this is just a clear case where the intent of the act, the intent of the protection is to protect people in cases like this, and it should. And if it doesn't, then it needs to change. I think most people would think that.
So what needs to change then? I guess that's the big question, isn't it? We can sit here and almost moan and whinge about how it does need to change. But Gurpreet, I don't know what you would say about what does need to happen to Section 75.
So yeah, if we sort of take this back, the Consumer Credit Act, it's dated back to 1974, so it's so out of date. And the government is looking at reforming the Consumer Credit Act, which includes Section 75 as a protection. And essentially, I think what we want is to see that it's obviously maintained. It's important because broadly it does work, but the issue is that, it's being misapplied, and we would want to see it strengthened for consumers. And that might be, looking at, certain areas where there is this confusion. So where you've got third-party intermediaries, whether we want that to be put into Section 75. We'll have to see what the plan is with Section 75, because in some ways it could be seen as, it's doing the job, but maybe they just need a bit more clarity around areas. Or will it be that it'll be more prescriptive? So we'll see things like, Section 75 applies to BNPL payments. So it should apply where you've got a third-party intermediary. So we don't know the level of, prescription that will happen. But the point is that, the government is looking at it and it's looking to modernize it. But we know that consumers love this protection. It is used, and we have lots of survey data around the use of Section 75. And what we want to make sure is that it's not watered down. So to have this baseline is really important. Yes, it should be strengthened for consumers, but it shouldn't be watered down. And so a lot of that sort of, looking at the reform around the Consumer Credit Act, some of that work's going to be taking place this year. And hopefully we can lend a voice to that discussion on behalf of consumers.
Yeah, I guess that's probably what consumers want. And Chiara, you probably speak to a lot of consumers doing, your day-to-day job. They just want it to be as straightforward as possible. The going through the claim, I was just looking at some of your data, 59% of claimants said it was easy or very easy to make the claim. But you want a lot more people than that to understand how easy and straightforward Section 75 protection should be as well.
So, it's great. It's great that it sounds like most card providers are making the process easy. And I think generally people get responses fairly quickly. Obviously, it depends on the complexity of the case, the complexity of the contract in question. But generally speaking, I think the process is fine from what we can gather. It's the application of the protections, the confusion surrounding it. It's confusing for consumers. It sounds to me like it's confusing for card providers. It's confusing for the Ombudsman. It's confusing for me. I just think it's too messy. We want people to shop with confidence. And although I suppose the message is still relatively simple, credit cards are still a great way to pay. But it shouldn't be this hard to work out when you're not covered. And I think, as Gurpreet said, it's very old legislation being applied to very new ways to pay, and it just doesn't quite work at the moment. We just need much more clarity, and absolutely keeping the base protection there, and ideally improving it, making it stronger so that people can shop with confidence.
So if that's what we want to change, just a quick reiteration of how people can feel like they are protected. You would still say use a credit card where possible, because that gives you the best possible chance of, or the greatest amount of protection.
You'll have Section 75 if it's for purchases over 100, for goods worth over £100, and you can fall back on chargeback. In fact, more often than not, your card provider will process Section 75 claims as chargeback, because there's a kind of existing process for that, and they can claim some of the money back, obviously, and then they'll usually try Section 75 afterwards if chargeback fails. So definitely keep paying with a credit card for risky payments and for expensive purchases.
And it's just a safety net, isn't it? Because if you're not getting anywhere with your retailer, or a company's gone bust, then you know that you've got this safety net of using Section 75 as another route to recover that money. So it's a really important protection in that regard.
Absolutely, and it's really easy more often than not. So you can usually raise a dispute by calling customer services, or these days probably the easiest option is to either check your app or online banking if you use it, and there'll be an online form or a button you can click to raise a dispute, query a transaction. They use different phrases, but quite often it can just be clicking the payment in question and raising a dispute that way. If not, a lot of the banks have online forms which make it really easy for you.
Lovely stuff. Some solid advice there from the pair of you. Anything else to add before we wrap up?
I think the message, so when Chiara and I looked at this, was, to be persistent. So if you're told by your credit card provider, that it doesn't apply because there's this fourth party in the transaction, or they think the link is broken, I think it's worth going to the FOS. It's free, and, you want to be able to fight your corner, and especially when credit card purchases, they can be quite expensive. They're not small amounts. £100 isn't a small amount for by any means. I think it's worth having a go, and we are seeing that lots of the decisions that we saw were overturned, and people got their money back. So I think that was my main message, like from working on this with you, that you should always try the FOS route.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no harm, and as we said earlier, I think some card providers are taking a little time to catch up with the new thinking. So it's definitely worth fighting your case.
Be persistent. It's always a very good message for this regard. Thank you both for coming on the podcast. Great to have you. Gurpreet, thanks for coming back after a little while away.
Thank you. Thanks.
And Chiara, thanks as ever for coming back on.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from Which, the UK's consumer champion. You can find plenty more advice about what we discussed today in the show notes. There you'll also find a link to become a Which member for 50% off the usual price, an offer exclusively available to you, our podcast listeners. Joining Which will not only give you access to all of our product reviews, our app, one-to-one personalised buying advice and every issue of Which magazine across the year, but you'll also be helping us to make life simpler, fairer and safer for everyone. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you'll be notified whenever we release a new episode of Which Money, Which Shorts, or another podcast that we make for you. And if you want to get in touch with us, then follow us on social media. We're at Which UK, or you can drop us an email to podcasts@which.co.uk. See you next time.
If you're enjoying this podcast from us here at Which, then why not become a Which member? Right now, we've got a special offer, especially for podcast listeners, meaning you can choose any of our 3 membership tiers for 50% off the usual price. Starting at just £39.50 for a full year, you can get Which magazine delivered direct to your door. For the same price, you could also choose a digital Which subscription, giving you access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, and the digital edition of Which magazine. What's more, you'll also be able to use the Ask Which service for personalised one-to-one buying advice. Or why not get a full access Which subscription for just £49.50 for a full year? Don't forget, that's 50% off the usual price. To join Which or to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/podcast offer. That's which.co.uk/podcast offer. Or click the link in the description for today's podcast for 50% off a Which annual subscription.